Hey everyone, welcome to the Kosher Intuitive. My name is Yael Meisels, intuitive healer and life coach. On today's episode, we're going to cover, a topic, but also I'm going to share a situation that's unfolded and, to some degree still unfolds in my life. The topic of today's show is leaving a narrative that doesn't service us. And in my personal life, I call it leaving the Sheila narrative. Now, for those of you who don't know, Yael is my Hebrew name. Meisels is my married name to my ex-husband, thus the father of my children. And my legal English name is actually Christine Sheila. So Sheila is one of my English names, and it was the name that I was called growing up. So when I decided to do this topic about leaving the narratives that don't serve us, I thought about, leaving the Sheila narrative. How exactly did I do that? Just to give those of you some background, and for those of you who follow the show, you already know this, but I am a person who publicly speaks about being a victim of child abuse. I publicly speak about being a victim of childhood sex abuse. And these are things that I've received a significant amount of healing in throughout the course of my life. And what can I say? Recovery is possible, but you really do have to completely leave the narrative that doesn't service you. Now, before I go any further, I am going to give a trigger warning. Anybody who finds the topic of child sex abuse or child abuse triggering, this is not a topic for you. I would suggest turning it off now, because these topics are going to be covered in today's episode. So, growing up, I guess we'll kind of backpedal a little bit. So one of the biggest reasons that I decided that perhaps this topic might be necessary now is something I'm going to share privately, or share about my private life, is that for the last about 20 years, and certainly in the entire time that I have been a mother, I have been dealing with a quiet stalker. This woman is the sister, the last living relative of my biological mother, whom I usually refer to people who watch the show as the woman who raised me. There's so much there to unpack, but the gist of it is, through the series of events that unfolded in my entire life, with the woman who raised me, we'll call her JP, with my entire life through the events that unfolded with JP, it was clear to me that, and I noticed this even after JP passed, going through her things, I being her only biological child, I inherited her home, and it's the things that JP did in my life, in my childhood, in my adult life, but even the things that I found, after JP died, it really was the intention of my biological mother to hate me the rest of her life. To make a very long story short, I am the product of a married man and his mistress. To make a long story short, my father was a Detroit police officer who was in process of a divorce, but also trying to prevent that divorce from happening whilst dating JP on the side, and, conceived me. And, in the mind of JP, who, just to give you some background, my biological mother was raised in such a hellaciously abusive environment of physical abuse, sexual abuse, alcoholism. When she and her elder sister, coincidentally, the one who's been stalking me for the better part of 20 years, were 5 and 6 years old, JP and her elder sister were taken from their parents' home and put into a foster care situation as a result of her father being caught sexually assaulting one of her sisters. JP, my biological mother in my life, has shared with me ad nauseum, and friends of hers, an ex-boyfriend, JP being a victim of sexual abuse was no secret. It seems to be, though, her elder sister, who is still living, believes this isn't true. So there's some conflict there. But if you really want to get technical and pay attention to everything, is that my biological mother, JP, acted, and I know this as a 20-year life coach, and I've coached people in hellacious circumstances. JP had the behaviors of a person who had experienced sexual abuse and never had any type of counseling, healing, therapy, nothing. And the sad reality is that as I was growing up, one of the things, I'm certainly no therapist or no psychiatrist, but as being a life coach and having been a recipient of therapy for the better part of 35 years, I can tell you that if I had to guess, I would say it's very likely my biological mother may have had post-traumatic stress disorder for sure, explosive behavior, very possibly bipolar 1. And if you don't know the difference between bipolar 1 and 2, please, at your leisure, I'm not going to get into that today. Google what that means. I think JP more identified with bipolar 1. And the interesting part is when she would get into her screaming rages, she would scream about, being sexually assaulted by her dad. And the scary part is she'd scream at me. She'd scream at her boyfriend. She'd scream at the world. Even since the woman died, people have come to me and asked me, did I know my mother was a victim? Yes, I did. She told everybody except the police or a therapist. And these allegations, her one living sister from this family who has stalked me for the better part of 20 years has viciously denied. Now, it has been the last 13 years since I've been a mother. It has been a rough road having a stalker who hates you, who thinks you're crazy because their sister hated you. I want to be clear about something. I was nobody's bundle of joy, all right? I was conceived for a purpose. And that purpose was JP, my biological mother, was well into her 30s, still single, had enough, and she thought by getting herself pregnant by someone more successful would not only land her a baby, but in her mind, the baby would be the glue that would glue her and man together. In JP's mind, that's how that narrative goes. And the sad reality is that that was not at all how it went down with my biological mother. And to this day, my biological father passed away almost 2 years ago. I've spoken to the man twice on the phone, never once seen his face. And he is dead now. So, but even in the 2 conversations that I had with my biological father, he was very clear about what his relationship was, with my biological mother. It was about having fun, having a good time, someone to blow off steam with. She wanted it to be something substantially more and thought that having a baby would facilitate that, and it didn't. Long story short, JP then said Nana and a boo-boo to my biological father and went and told his wife that she was the mistress and pregnant. Big fucking mess, right? Like, my biological mother was the type of woman to have an affair and a baby with a married man, hoping that it would get her somewhere, and it certainly didn't. And what it did get her, though, unfortunately, and fortunately for me, is a baby she didn't want, a baby she wasn't equipped to take care of physically, financially, certainly not spiritually, certainly not emotionally, certainly not mentally. And I was a problem that this poor woman had to now deal with. I was a mess she got herself into. And, certainly God had a sense of humor, because I was unlike any kid she had ever had any type of exposure to. And the narrative, and this is where I call it the Sheila narrative, right? So the narrative is, I was raised in an environment where even from infancy and conception, I did not serve my purpose. And my purpose was, again, to be the glue between biological mother JP and biological father LL. And when that did not happen, JP is stuck with a baby she doesn't want. That's a big deal. And I was treated as if I was something a person was tired of contending with, because the truth of the matter was and is that in my life, I was being contended with by my biological mother literally until she died. I did not feel the relief of any type of peace surrounding that situation until that woman was dead in the ground. It was like having someone who constantly didn't like you, who was constantly disappointed. It didn't matter what you could do. Just staring over your life, hating you. That was basically and then feeling guilty because she knows as a person she's supposed to love this person and doesn't know what to do with those feelings. And as a result of never getting the proper psychiatric care that JP needed, the things that she did do was run to her support system, which was her brothers and sisters. JP had no friends, and she would go to this support system. And if the narrative the story she was telling, if the story she was telling didn't service her or her interests or put her in the position of victimhood, what JP would then do is alter the story where she could be in victimhood, and then she would go report said news to brother, sister, whomever, right? several people that were the parents of children that I was friendly with as a child, some of them, certainly not all of them, some of them came from good homes. And the children who did come from good homes were oftentimes not allowed to play at my house. And I found out years later, because of my mother's erratic behavior, and then because of her, I don't even know what to call it, relationship with some bum painting the porch next door to the house we lived in for 18 years, who smelled like mold and motor oil. Gross. But this was who she chose to spend her time with. All right. Never married her. And we've got some funny stories about that in a minute. But, you know, the problem here is that JP would start fights, not know what to do, reach out to siblings, receive horrible advice. And then she's also not only receiving terrible advice, but she's also putting in the mind of her sibling, which I guess would technically be my aunt or uncle, what her thoughts are pertaining to her only child. The sister of JP's who stalks me has, I mean, when I think back on my memories of her as a child, I remember her being, most of the time, to give her credit where credit is due. And I will do that even if I think you're a salamander. I give credit where credit is due. I am very fair. I feel like the sister of JP, the current one who's 77 years old and still stalking, was put in the position of being the referee between JP and this character Sheila, right? And I call my life before being Jewish a character Sheila, because this character Sheila was never who I was. I didn't know who I was, but I knew that I wasn't Sheila. And the reality is Sheila is a figment of JP's imagination. And which is also very interesting is that JP's biological mother, so for argument's sake, my biological grandmother, would call JP Sheila. And again, it just, the sickness just breeds. So, you know, one of the things JP would do is buy beautiful toys and then scream and yell about me not taking care of them and how if she had these, when, you know, JP was essentially living her childhood in the ways that she could through this Sheila, while simultaneously hating Sheila and making sure everybody else hated Sheila at the same time. You know, it was really, truly, and I love you, I hate you, don't leave me type of situation. And, you know, I do recall giving credit where credit is due. This sister, who is grossly mentally ill, acts and behaves in her 70s. And, you know, at 77 years old, you're going to die any minute. You are on your deathbed at that point. To still be chasing me is, I'm going to use a Yiddish word here, verkackte nuts. I can't wrap my brain around why somebody at 77 years old knows their time on this earth is limited. They know that. And then this is how they choose to behave, is beyond my wildest comprehension, but this is what she does. Excuse me. The character Sheila was just always such a problem for JP. And then JP would go to sister. Sister would be thrusted into the situation of being not only the defender of her sister, but also the peacemaker between what was then mother and daughter, which never, peace was never attained. And thus created what I call the Sheila narrative. JP, my biological mother, was too sick from her childhood, from her upbringing, and from her choices to have ever raised any type of child the right way. And, you can be an amazing aunt, an amazing uncle, an amazing cousin, sibling, babysitter. That is no guarantee that you're going to be an amazing parent. I am certainly, it's interesting. I am not the theoretical parent I thought I would be. In a lot of ways, I'm much better. In a lot of ways, I wish I could, I'm still growing. And, but the key difference here, though, with my relationship to my children and my relationship to JP, my former, my former mother, is there is actual maternal love that does exist between myself and my children, and that love is reciprocated. JP didn't have that in her own life. Nobody nurtured her. Nobody taught her. She became a broken person. If you look at her behavior patterns, both JP and her currently still alive sister, Amakshimo, both had serious behaviors that you often see in individuals who were sexually assaulted as children, that received no type of treatment, mental or emotional treatment to overcome these horrific events. And thus, it almost like demonizes these people and how they can behave in other avenues. I even see, even though JP's sister still stalks me, which is comical at this point, threatening lawsuits and all sorts of, bring it, bitch. Like, it's so funny because this woman actually does watch this show. Thank you for the numbers on YouTube. She goes around threatening lawsuits. There's no grounds to sue anybody. You know that. There's no defamation. There's no damages. It's just mental illness. It's just mental illness talking. When JP's sister goes on her tangents, it's mental illness talking. And you're able to almost like see, like, what did somebody, you want to say, like, what did somebody do to you? But I already know what somebody did to her because I, unfortunately know JP's story, and they grew up in the same house. They were, even when they were taken away, they were put in the same foster care. I can only imagine that JP and this sister have a whole lot in common. But the tumultuous relationship between myself and my biological mother never dissipated. I spent my childhood being dragged from psychiatrist to therapist, trying to figure out what is wrong with me. Now I work as a clairvoyant energy healer and life coach, and I'm one of the most known in the entire Jewish world. I have rabbis that back this business, that this business is kosher, and everything that is done here is in accordance to Jewish law, letter of the law. Nobody could suggest to JP that this child is of higher intelligence and just very different. It was always, something is wrong with Sheila and I have to fix her. So and what was really wrong with this Sheila was JP didn't love Sheila. Sheila didn't love JP because JP didn't love Sheila. Thus, Sheila never learned to love JP. So there was really no, it was almost like this. It wasn't a, thank you so much, Brienne. And I want you to know it's just comical that this woman oh, when she couldn't stalk me, she then tried to stalk Brienne, but that's another conversation. But, children are taught how to love by how they are loved. Just like children are taught how to worship, think, feel such and such based on what you give to them. Most people are not going, I hate to say this, but are not going to come from the type of environment that I come from without serious help and become something, any kind of success, whether it's as a person, finances. And I want to make clear, I won't, never will hold the value of a human being, especially the value of a victim who persevered and overcame, by what they have in the bank. I hold value from people who persevered by how they conduct their life, not by what they have in the bank. Because at the end of the day, how much money you're going to have, whether you work like a slave or sit on your ass and practically do nothing, God decides your dollar amount on Rosh Hashanah, and don't you ever forget that. Money has nothing to do with the value of a person's success or the value of their ability to change, grow, and persevere beyond their circumstances, which I think you, God in heaven, have done. But which leaves us to where we are today. The biological mother of mine raised me in a narrative where I was fresh meat and fair game to anybody who chose to come take a swing. I was her family's piñata. Just to give you guys, and this is a horrific story, and I told you there's a trigger warning at the beginning of this video. Now, how I even found myself into the home of the relative whose elder child sexually assaulted me for 2 years was JP was at a gas station in Hazel Park, Michigan in the 80s, which I am telling you, Hazel Park, Michigan in the 80s was not Hazel Park, Michigan today. All right? You lived there because you had to live there, not because you wanted to live there. Anywho, bumps into this distant cousin of hers who she hadn't seen in the better part of 20 years, didn't even know this cousin had had children. In that happenstance meeting at a gas station, when JP ran in to a long-lost relative, that was actually how I got into the home where I was sexually abused for 2 years. This individual would hand me off to anybody. And she thought, we're cousins. No, you're not cousins. You haven't seen this woman in 20 years. You don't know this individual. You don't know that they're safe. I mean, this was just one way. There was no background check. You have to understand something. I get it's the 80s, but I have friends as an adult and even as someone in high school who went home to good homes. Background checks were done by good parents in their own way in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't done the way we do them today, and probably not with the vigor that we do them today, but they were done. And responsible parents were parenting responsibly back in those days. I, unfortunately, was not a recipient of that kind of parenting. Now, The sister of the biological mother holds herself into some higher regard for some insane reason. She considers herself, her words were, the matriarch of that family. All right. Do, 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 do. And for some reason thinks, and still does, that her being sisters with my biological mother entitles her to torture me until this woman is in a coffin. Please, God, let it be immediately. I mean, I know my biological mother's sister stalks me because she was handed over the hatred of my biological mother as I was being raised, and saw her sister, a fellow victim whom she was raised with, going through duress. You know, we don't even try children as adults. I've been tried as an adult my entire life. I mean, I wasn't even allowed to embrace childhood. I didn't have one. I was being held responsible for every choice that I made as a teenage girl. One of the reasons I'm able to take I hate to say this, but probably able to take the level of accountability that I take in this, in my present life now, and probably how I've become so good at coaching other people to hold themselves accountable, is because my being a kid or a little kid never, ever, 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 ever factored in to the harsh judgments being brought down on me. My being a child it wasn't allowed, let alone was it considered. You know, I had, just to give you an example, I had truancy issues in high school. I was being bullied at home, bullied at school, bullied in every direction, and it made me physically ill. And I stayed home a lot. How would a person thrive in an environment where they're facing abuse from all cylinders, and then they're being thrusted into therapy because their mother hates them, on a different medication because the mother can't, well, I don't love my daughter because give her a pill. I mean, I was the victim of forced psychiatry. It's just another layer of the abusive onion. I'm also the victim of forced psychiatry. I actually had to have a diagnosis removed from a medical record recently because it was never true. And it was going back from the 90s when an idiot was allowed to spit out whatever they thought was wrong with it. Was terrible. I literally had to have recently a diagnosis expunged from my medical records of a diagnosis from back in the 90s as a result of my biological mother just hating being a parent. So the bottom line is, this biological mother of mine truly did allow her family. Like I said, I was as if I was her family's piñata. Everyone come to this Sheila and take a swing. Beat her to death if you want to. And, my relationship with her sister when I was younger, I can tell you I've had some of the only decent childhood memories I've ever even had were with her sister, who is now the spawn of something evil and needs to be obliterated. Something within that woman changed. And I think what's interesting is that until about very young toddler age, till 7, my biological mother traveled so much that she did not have hands-on, daily, day in, day out mommying like I do, like most of the people watching this show do. We have day in, day out mommying. JP couldn't do these things. She traveled purposely, handed me to pedophiles, and went and handled her business. She purposely had a job that kept her from parenting until she was finally fired from that job. Now, she would never have left. She would have told you otherwise. I'm telling you, that woman never would have left that job. And as soon as she had to be a day in and day out parent, and I got to really know her, it turns out we didn't like each other all that much. And then she went and found literally a bum who had his own case of child neglect, who has his own shit show of an upbringing and had a shit show with a daughter. She went and found this bum. Now, ladies and gentlemen who watch this show, I want you to understand something. I am being critical here for a number of reasons. Because the biggest one being the choices of this woman, which I do not hold responsible for any struggle I currently have today. Let me make that very fucking clear. Anybody who comes to the business, the Kosher Intuitive, you know we don't blame our parents. We don't blame God. We don't blame Satan. We take accountability. Now, there's a time in our lives where you can't take accountability because you aren't in charge of what happens to you. But as soon as that threshold is crossed, it's all you at that point. Even if you have emotional damage, it's your responsibility to fix that emotional damage and not carry it through life, as I've seen every example of parental figure I ever had do in my life. Now, I want you guys to understand something, and I will jump back to the topic in a minute, but I just want you to try to fathom for a second. You've got my biological mother, JP, and her boyfriend, we'll call him K. JP and K are together for 18 years. Now, JP used to say ad nauseum, you never live with a man who isn't your husband. Well, around the time I was 14, she got tired of hoping and wishing, praying that this bum she found off the street, literally painting the backyard fence or whatever it was, the backyard deck, would marry her. And the bum even went as far as to buy the idiot an engagement ring. And then what he did was, I'll give you the engagement ring if you do this, if you do that. The bottom line is he bought her an engagement ring to taunt her with. Now, finally, I guess after I was out of the house, he had owned this engagement ring for I don't even know how many years. I guess JP asked him if she could wear it and said, I understand we're not engaged. This is according to Kay, the boyfriend. So apparently he let her wear the ring. And Kay has made very clear since the passing of JP that was no engagement ring, because a man who spent 18 years with a woman let that woman she lived with him from when I was about 15 to 24, and with a year break, 8 years of living together. No proposal. After my biological mother died, her boyfriend went on a hunt, a treasure hunt, to get her engagement ring back. And as luck would have it, I ran into him at a bike store near my house a couple of years ago. The man looked a mess. He was babbling about being a millionaire, which even if it's true, he's crazy out of his mind, and brought up her ring and made sure to tell me again that that was no gift. He was letting her wear it, and he wants his ring back. Now, what's more is that before he had bumped into me at the bike store, he had actually gone to the home of JP's niece, who was about her age, seeking the whereabouts of the ring. He went to a relative of my dead biological mother's home, talked about himself ad nauseum, and then inquired, where on earth can I pick up that engagement ring I let her wear? These are the shit bags that thought they were going to prepare me for life. Now, as you can piece together from hearing all this madness, JP's sister, who until I was about 13 or 14, I was close with, my relationship with her beyond the age of 9 became more and more tumultuous. And it started to become, as I started to find myself in Judaism, she then, now let me just make clear, her older sister, who was like the referee in the situation, I was guilty of not being thin and pretty. So her sister would do everything she could to let me know that I need to lose weight and do this and do that. And so she was hypercritical all the time. And then when I wanted to convert to Judaism at 14 years old, which I did reform at 15 and then Orthodox at 21, she then made allegations that I was a member of a cult. The bottom line is I never have and never will and can never do anything that is satisfactory to any member of that family. And the way this woman has ran after us, she has made in the 13 years that I have been a mother, several child protective services cases. She admits to one, that's fine. There's lots of others. We're not stupid. She will make Facebook accounts that are not her primary account that she uses to watch me and stalk me. And then I'll find that account. You have to block it. Then a new one pops up. And recently she's decided, since she can't silence me, she would then try to start to harass witnesses of that grew up that grew up around me, that saw the things that I say occurred. They saw these things occur themselves. My biological mother's sister has now tried to stalk these people, threatening them with lawsuits. It's basically like a lawsuit threat from this woman truly is no more tangible than 2 5-year-olds suing each other over the toy. It's no laws have been broken. Now, if it offends someone that I share the truth of what I went through and how I healed from it and am still healing from it, if that bothers you, watch fucking something else. But nothing that goes on here is illegal. And when she can't tackle me as a bad parent, She then tries to tackle me for being a professional clairvoyant. Listen, if you're a person, and I say this knowing full well that the sister of my biological mother is going to watch this. She's one of our biggest supporters on YouTube, for fuck's sakes. To sue somebody, damages not only have to be done, they have to be provable. There have been no damages on either side here that would bring anyone legitimately into a courtroom that would be entertained as anything serious or anything to take seriously. As in, I've gone out of my way for the last 14 years to run from my life from this woman. Restraining orders have been put in place. There was a time she was threatening physical violence when JP was still alive. My children and I had to leave. We were living in my mother's home temporarily. We had to leave immediately. So many just lunatic things this woman has done. And it's coming from a place of feeling out of control, not knowing what to do. If she doesn't want to acknowledge her pain, feel it and heal from it, go through it, grow through it. If she doesn't want to do that, that is really her business. But that is what I do. I heal through my pain. I go through it, grow through it. I don't allow the horrible things that have gone on in my life hinder me from not only enjoying my life, but being mentally well. Even if someone wasn't mentally, even if someone was mentally ill 10 years ago, it's where they are today that matters. It's where they are today in their life that matters. I know a lot of people that it took them a long time. I didn't even start dealing with being a victim of sexual abuse until I was 30. I didn't even start dealing with the depth of the abilities that I now use every day in my coaching business to help it heal and, lift up my fellow human being. I just started to deal with these things in my 30s, and it's just amazing to me to see how the hatred thrusted on me by my biological mother was then handed out to her family like pieces of cake. And they all just thought they could continue to beat this woman whom they call Sheila for the rest of their days. There was even a situation where one of my biological mother's nieces from a brother, Amakshimo, who thank God is dead, his daughter has been in and out of jail her entire life. Okay. The problem started to the best of my knowledge in the teenage years, never stopped. This woman has 2 children that are just a mess. She's been in and out of jail, in and out of psych wards, on disability. You can't, she's just a shame to look at. And like my mother, the men she finds appealing are trash. And she let me know that her boyfriend, who I don't know, went to prison for something and got out of prison. All of this woman's boyfriends have been to prison. Apparently they went, long story short, they went to Detroit to buy a bag of weed. He decided to do a bump of coke that was laced with fentanyl and had an immediate overdose and something and had to be rushed to the hospital. Now, because this individual has 2 children, I felt in Judaism what we would call an achrayus, because I was speaking to the biological relatives at that time. I don't speak to any but one now. So I felt an achrayus to let her brother know what was going on. And one afternoon, I was minding my own business on my back patio I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. She came and just decided to start slugging me in the face. And of course, the dead mother's sister chimed in. It had to have been less than 5 years ago because JP died in October of 2020. And this happened the conclusion of that following winter. So, so much just, and this doesn't even scratch the surface of the lunacy that I've been through. Just the sheer lunacy of the things that I've witnessed in my life. But I felt like it is so important to talk about this because we actually can leave forever these narratives. The bottom line here is I understand the name the biological woman who gave birth to me gave me was Christine Sheila. That never felt like my name. And it's interesting because I look at the character in their lives that is Sheila, and it's so sad because these individuals just want to eat this Sheila alive. And I've had countless trips to the police station to report the shenanigans these people do. You would think someone in their 70s would be, have better things to do, but also perhaps be humiliated and embarrassed to behave this way. And unfortunately, she's not. It's interesting because this sister of my biological mother's, who just, how do I say this nicely, can't leave this family alone when she's been told countless times, don't bother these people, don't talk to these people, don't look at these people. As I said at the beginning of the show, one, Facebook account is blocked, another one pops up. It's like whack-a-mole with this crazy woman. I could shoot in the face whoever taught this elderly bitch how to use Facebook. But it's so clear to me that in their mind, this Sheila was going to be somebody that these people were going to just viciously and maliciously assault, attack, beat up, rape, rob, whatever they could get from me. The reality is like this, especially when I have JP's sister running around saying, threatening lawsuits. No laws have been broken out of the countless child protective services cases filed against me, which is just a shame because there are really children in trouble that has just never been the case for my children. The kids are in a great position. Even the relative that I do speak to also lives in the Sheila narrative. I've had to put this woman in check so many times. You can't talk to me that way. I'm not, you can't treat me. And I think to myself, I am down to one blood relative that I don't even consider in the eyes of God family. It's basically, this is my last tie to these people. And the sad reality is my dead mother's sister only pretty much engages with this relative that I speak to stalk me. And this relative that I speak to has told me on 3 separate occasions that my dead mother's sister has inquired about the status of my children's genitals as to whether or not they are circumcised, because in her idiot mind, she didn't think Judaism permitted circumcision when Judaism is the reason that all circumcision exists. You know, it shows me a few things that she would say this. And I've got to tell you, the relative I do speak to has nothing to gain from making things like this up. It would not be within this individual's nature. And, should this business of threatening lawsuits persist, if this situation, God forbid, were to ever go in front of a judge, you better believe I would subpoena this relative, and make them swear on a Bible that everything I'm saying to you right now is what they said, is what they heard. Now, this may be shocking to some people, but there are some victims, I hate to say it, and I fear that the sister of my biological mother falls under this category. I fear this. But because they are raised in such a chaotic environment, in such high levels of abuse and just a moral filth and all sorts of garbage, right? They almost get desensitized to certain elements of abuse and even certain elements of sexual abuse. Now, I look at my biological mother's sister and the fact that she would even speak, that I'm aware of on 3 separate occasions, about my children's genitalia to a relative when she has not seen us, heard from us, knows nothing of us, firsthand in years and years. It shows me she is afflicted to some degree with pedophilia, because this individual doesn't comprehend that the fact that you're even talking about this woman's children's private areas makes you mentally sick. It makes you, to some degree, you at that point, you are contending with, I hate to say this, but my biological mother's sister at in her 70s is contending with some level of pedophilia. Now, I'm assuming she's a non-offending pedophile. If anybody has anything else to say on that topic, you are welcome to reach out to me privately, or I would even say that's after you involve law enforcement. When I told my therapist that, the look on her face was priceless. It was a look of horror. It was a look I had never seen in the 3 years of being this woman's in treatment, therapeutic treatment with this woman. It was the look of horror on her face I've never seen before. But the reason I bring this up is not only because it is very true. It is just goddamn fact that this woman talks like this about my children. The sicker part is this individual isn't able to internally look into one's own self and say to one's own self, I'm crossing lines. This is a person that is so unhinged They can't put themselves in check. You know, there was a situation with this woman back around Hanukkah time. She wanted to buy my kids coats. Well, I have said to the relative that I do speak to, I really don't want to take anything from this woman for any reason. And, she kind of talked me into it. So I said, okay, I find some coats. Everything was too expensive. So I said, fuck it. I bought my children coats. They were going to get coats anyway. It was just a matter of, was I going to buy it or was this bitch going to buy it? Then it came down to buying them boots. We went through the same song and dance. Every boot was too expensive. We finally find winter boots at JCPenney's for $30 a pair. The dead mother's sister actually said that a store, JCPenney's, which is the birthplace of gifting things and sending it out by mail, wouldn't send them to our house, so she had to have them sent to her house. I said to the relative that I speak to, not a problem. We won't be home most of the day. This individual is welcome to put these items on my front porch and skedaddle. Well, this woman wanted to confront me and would not put the boots on the front porch, knowing they would not be stolen. We have neighbors all over the place. This was an excuse to find any reason to come not only to my house, but to look at my face and to look at my children. At which point I said to the relative I do speak to, this is enough. I want these boots sent back. And I never, and I mean never, want to hear about this person again. Listen, my children have absolutely never, not for a minute, have gone without anything they want or need. And I want to make that clear. They've never gone without anything they want either. These are children that, while I may not have millions and millions, my children live a comfortable life. They have beautiful things. They go to a beautiful school. They are beautiful people, for fuck's sakes. And all the while I am raising these beautiful people, I deal with constant knocks on my door pertaining to my mental health from Child Protective Services because my dead mother's fucking sister can't leave us alone, hates my guts. My dead mother's sister at this juncture of her life calls Judaism a cult. Now, I know prior to my converting to Judaism, this idiot has probably never given Judaism a thought. It only became an obsession when the person she loves to hate and is obsessed with hating became Jewish. I could run a campaign to kick Kim Jong-un out of North Korea. This bitch would campaign for him if it meant being my opponent, which I don't think I have an opponent. I am so remarkably tired of having a lunatic that I have ran from for 20 years. I have reported them countless times to the police station. Like, why isn't this woman embarrassed? Why isn't she embarrassed to be 77 years old and running after these Jewish people who don't want to know from you? This individual knows that. The police know that. A restraining order at one point was involved. My children's school even know if you are to show up to call the police come the fuck on. And I can comfortably use this platform to speak to this person. Because to the level that I'm stalked, there hasn't been an episode of the Kosher Intuitive. This crazy pants, the Shemo, may they die soon, may she die soon, hasn't seen. You know, I gotta tell ya, in Judaism, we are not the love thy enemy type. Our laws teach eye for an eye. Now, I don't know, truly, what anyone thinks they stand to gain threatening me with lawsuits, threatening the individuals whom I grew up with, who saw the things that I went through, and simultaneously I saw the things they went through. There's no value in stalking these people. There's no lawsuits here to be had. There's no reason to involve any member of law enforcement against me. I want this person, this individual has been dead to me. I'd like them to remain dead to me. I'd like them to physically die. I mean, I wish nothing good for this woman. Nothing. I am not a love thy enemy type. I want her dead in a coffin. And I want it to happen immediately. Because what this woman has brought to my life, anybody with any self-respect would want a person like that dead in a coffin. The narratives, plural, that I left was, I don't allow anyone to victimize me anymore. I have made enough mistakes as a result of where I come from and choose not to make those mistakes again. When I cut a person off, they are gone. If you are blocked from my Facebook phone, believe me, you are a dead person to me. If I block you, that's it. That means something. Just by the way, if I block you on Facebook, you are blocked in real life. Yeah, you are to never. And I think what the sickness runs so deep, like I think about the fact that in the biological mother, JP's family, every one of her siblings, and she was one of a pile of 13 fucked up kids. And the father was drinking and beating and raping and molesting, raping and pillaging the village, for fuck's sakes. Truly, I hate to say it, where I have some humanities for my biological mother, I feel that I hate that anybody would grow up in that environment. But again, we can't allow our environments to paralyze us the rest of our lives. And certainly it can't be a scapegoat for being an abuser yourself. And every brother she had was an alcoholic. To the best of my knowledge, every brother she had who was a married man, with the exception of one who was a gross adult. First of all, most of her siblings, including the sister that is still alive, committed adultery. Her eldest brother, who is the father of her niece that is about her age, committed adultery, left, right, and center. The mistress showed up at the funeral. I mean, all of these people have tumultuous relationships to some degree or another, to different severities with their children. There is enough evidence here, looking at that family and looking where I'm at in my family and the choices I make today and the home that I have and the life that I have. And one could conceivably argue I left a horrible narrative where my only purpose was to be a beating punching bag to the dead mother and her fucking fakakta family in Shemo. I still persevered going through this. I did. I still persevered. And the bottom line here is, even when I have been dealing with a lunatic stalker who goes and tells perfect strangers on Facebook that first of all, she threatens to sue these people for nothing, and then goes and tells them how my claims of abuse are lies and things of this nature. Like, it's a waste of your life to do that. Everything I say happened in my upbringing that I share on this show did happen. And I have people in my life today as an adult that I have known for 36, 37, 35 years who would stand with me in a court of law, put their hand on their Bible, and swear to tell the whole truth and would corroborate what I'm saying. The problem here is that my dead mother's sister does not have that. The problem here is that there is another relative involved who could be subpoenaed. Whether she would participate willingly or not is irrelevant. She'd be subpoenaed to swear that on 3 separate occasions that I'm aware of, this gross woman engaged her in conversations pertaining to my children's genitalia. There is enough here on my side to legitimately retaliate, which I do not wish to do. But that is just something to mention. None of us. I will never be Sheila again. I am not the character Sheila that my biological mother tried to create. I am not the piñata for her family anymore. And I will continue to involve law enforcement every time these people flare up. They should be ashamed of themselves. If there's anybody here, another one of the biological mother's nieces tried to, again, Facebook stalking, don't talk to these people in years, tried to, well, see, here's the thing. So she knows the abuse happened. Where she tried to get me is where I denounce, in accordance to Jewish law, I'm obligated to do so. It's just in my situation, it was done with joy. That I should feel some sort of guilt or shame about not forgiving an evil woman who did everything she could in her life to neglect me. I mean, you know, I gotta tell you, I'm gonna close out with a story. My whole life, my biological mother has told me how she is building a case against me. Mental. For what, right? Because we don't get along? I hate you, you hate me. You throw rocks at me, I throw them back at you. That's what went on. There was no love there. There was no mother-daughter bond there. It was 2 people who were victims of circumstance that had nothing in common, that hated each other and didn't want to see the sight of each other. That's the truth, and everybody knows it. And what I find so repulsive is when I was going through the piles and piles and piles and piles and piles of shit that my dead mother left behind, I ran into a file of replies to emails she had sent me from me. These were only emails pertaining to arguments. She never printed the emails she sent that would prompt that response. But it showed me, beyond her death, This woman spent time in her life while other people scrapbook about their children, make, photo albums for their children. This psychopath was printing out argumentative emails, leaving her side always out, and building a file. Who the fuck does that? And the hashgacha pratis of this, the divine providence here, where I just feel zero guilt, zero achrayus, zero nothing towards this woman ever as my mother. The day that woman, I laid my eyes on her dead, the day I laid eyes on her for the last time, I had a meeting pertaining to an old case with Child Protective Services where I was able to hear, and again, her sister has called on us countless times. But I was able to hear during maybe the one time that having involvement would have been helpful. I, about 6 years ago, had a chemical interaction between two pills. And it caused me to have a nervous breakdown in which I went to the hospital. It was a very frightening time. I was acting very bizarre, very strange. And my biological mother not only wasn't helpful, she was angry at me and said horrible, horrible, horrible things to Child Protective Services. One of her allegations being, well, she couldn't say that I refuse mental health treatment because I had been in mental health treatment for years and years. I always have. So she then said, I refuse adequate mental health treatment. The statement, this broken, lost, pathetic woman gave about her only daughter. And I don't even identify as her daughter. She identified as my mom, come on, lady. Like, I don't even identify as your daughter. Mm-hmm. The fact that you could speak like this, it only comes from a place of hatred. It only comes from a place of gross mental illness, gross, broken, evil people that, who cares if they're possessed or not? Who gives a shit? This is who she was. And I'm allowed to own that truth. I'm allowed to speak about that truth. I will continue to speak about that truth. I will speak about the things that I went through in this life. I have something of value to give other people, whether the people I grew up around see that or not. That's really irrelevant to me. I don't see these people because they live a lifestyle that I find appalling. There are people that I find appalling. Just to give you an example, one of the dead mother's nieces, who's about my age, the one who was no longer allowed to come to my house, we had nothing in common anyway, but the one who was never allowed to come to my house after my biological mother got her bum boyfriend. She's a beautiful early 40s, highly successful woman and, was very taken care of by her parents. And again, other people in my family, some of them took care of their children. I was not so lucky. Brothers of my biological mother's children were not so lucky. A lot of tumultuous relationships, but a couple of good ones that would have been classified as a good one. Very attractive woman, very successful. I'm very proud of her for that. She's earned that with the help of her family, which that's fine. If you were able to help your child in that nature, you should. But I realized something. At JP's funeral, this woman and I had been Facebook friends for years and years. We almost walked right into each other, like literally almost walked right into each other. And she had the audacity to show up at my dead mother's funeral. I mean, listen, everybody knew this woman and I hated each other. It was, but not to wish condolences, said nothing to me. I realized probably about a month ago, this woman who I know, whatever her accomplishments are, I know from knowing her from childhood and from what I've, hear has become of her today, has the moral fabric of a sewer. While this individual has a very uppity-buppity career, which again, they deserve. The parents helped them get there. That's fine. What I couldn't look at anymore on the FB was I saw this attractive, successful woman in her early 40s living her best life, clearly a functional alcoholic, clearly a person who has trouble drinking. I don't want to look at drunk face. I don't want to look at a 40-something-year-old woman in bathing suits. I don't want to see this. And I realized that even though she and I have nothing to do with each other, we live in two different worlds. I don't want a window anymore into her life. I don't want her to have a window anymore into my life, and it just made sense to cut the connection because there was no connection there that made any sense anyways. We were Facebook friends because we've known each other for 40 years. Oh, no other reason. This individual knows she wasn't allowed to come to my house because of the choices my biological mother, who I no longer accept as a mother, she knows she wasn't allowed at my house because of that woman's choices. She knows that. She's seen me, actually, you want to talk about some shit. Shortly after I moved to New York, the first time I came back was for Christmas. Now, listen, Christmas is a very, got some bad memories around Christmas. Again, I am not a Christian. Christmas is not, there's a reason people, I hate to say this, like, there is a reason people commit suicide at Christmas time. It is not, for some people, the most wonderful time of the year. I had felt at that point in my early 20s some sort of achrayas to come back and celebrate this holiday with, the biological situation, who at that point was still with her then boyfriend, who was loaning her the ring that he came chasing after she died. But this niece of my dead mother's, who is the daughter of her niece, which is my mother's eldest brother's daughter. Again, being one of 13 children, when my biological mother was born, the grandmother's son was having a baby at the same time. Thus, these two girls, even though raised very differently, they were raised in the same environment. I do not believe the daughter of my biological mother's brother, whom I am referring to, was victimized at all, let alone in the ways that my mother was. I do know that my biological mother did not share this information with her, which is very strange. But she shared it with several other people who have then, in turn, over the years, especially since she passed, shared it with me. And I won't forget this because I wasn't yet Jewish. I was 20 years old. I was, becoming an Orthodox Jew, and the biological mother really wanted to see me. So I came back to her house, but the problem was she lived with her boyfriend who hated me. Well, since I was in town, some friends wanted to take me out. And basically this was a Christmas Day party. The guests were leaving, and I had been, basically thrown out of his home because I wanted to go have coffee or some tea with friends of mine. And the biological mother's boyfriend, said I was no longer welcome in his home and threw me out in the street with nowhere to go, miles away from my home in another state, where I have a home that I can go to. And I remember I was standing with my coat on. I had my suitcases waiting for my friend to come pick me up. And the nieces of my biological mother, the mother-daughter duo, saw me outside as they were going to their car and said that they were sorry that this was happening. What can you do, right? This was not a new issue. The sight of my face, set the biological mother's boyfriend off into a tangent. And, I was thrown out of his home. Basically told, if you're not going to adhere to X, Y, and Z under my roof. And I just said, I don't need this shit. I moved away from these people. I moved to another state. I have a completely different life. I did not make visiting a high priority. Ladies and gentlemen, I have overcome some serious levels of abuse. And I share this with you tonight because people need to know healing is possible, okay? And as I conclude, one of the best ways, now I've been a recipient of talk therapy on and off for 35 years, okay? Mostly on, especially as I've been a mother and, dealing with a stalker and going through divorces. I have 2 failed marriages, and I'm positive it's a direct response to being raised in chaos. Again, I'm not saying it nobody is responsible for those choices. I am, but I did not know to take accountability at 22 for being raised in such chaos that you have to change every element of your life just to be well. But how I really started to get well was a girlfriend of mine from Crown Heights, when I lived in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, had a sister who was doing energy work. And she and I had very different, she a lovely, lovely woman. She and I have very different practices. We do things extremely differently. But it helped alleviate the trauma. It helped release. I don't know how to, the word I'm using here is release the pain of the trauma. It doesn't take the trauma obviously away, but it does help release the pain inside of that trauma. And this is essentially what I've built a practice on today. When people who are typically my clients, I would say probably 75, 78%, have been victims of sexual assault in one regard or in the other, whether it was childhood, adulthood, what have you. And the sad reality is usually people find me after they've gone through so many other ways of trying to get well. I don't replace the therapist. I don't replace the doctor. I don't replace an attorney, making that very clear. But I mean, I realized that at the Kosher Intuitive, we and my colleagues associated with this company go out of our way to validate any victim until there is tangible, rock solid proof that, God forbid, this person making the allegation isn't a victim. And we don't have to be victims the rest of our lives. Even today, as I sit here contending still for 20 years with the 77-year-old insane asylum stalker who I just can't wait to drop dead in a coffin, I am still not allowing this to victimize me. I refuse to be a victim. I refuse to live in that narrative. I refuse to be a punching bag. I refuse to be the scapegoat. I refuse. And I had to resort to alternative healing to start getting well because there was so much trauma to unpack that at that point I was like, whatever it takes, I'm here to get well, whatever it takes. And the people that work with me in the Kosher Intuitive, we are looking to get well and be well, whatever it takes. That was this episode. And I truly thank you all for listening. It was a difficult topic to do, but I do difficult things every day and do them well. I thank you for listening. God bless all of you as we go into the redemption and the Messianic time. Let's just pray to get evil, wicked, and stupid off the planet as quickly as possible. And if anyone is dealing with, I guess, the emotional baggage of child abuse, any type of abuse, please don't hesitate to reach out. Consultations are always free. I have never turned a client away because of the dollar amount that they're able to pay. And, feel it and heal it and go through it, grow through it. Have a wonderful Thursday evening and a beautiful Shabbos.